help me reach 1,000 subscribers. Please like the video and share your thoughts on the video. Your feedback helps make the contents better. Now let's get to the story.
The conference room went dead silent as my mother's manicured hand reached across the mahogany table toward the inheritance documents. That's when I slammed my own hand down on the stack of papers, the sound echoing like a gunshot through the lawyer's office. "Touch those documents, and I'll have security escort you out in handcuffs," I said, my voice steady, despite the 15 years of abandonment burning in my chest. Her face went pale. My father, sitting beside her in his expensive suit that probably cost more than the second-hand clothes I wore as a homeless 13-year-old, looked like he'd seen a ghost. The lawyer, Mr. Peterson, shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting between us like he was watching a bomb about to explode. "Excuse me?" my mother stammered, her voice that same shrill pitch I remembered from the day she told me I was no longer her son. "Who do you think you are? We're here for Richard's will reading. Richard Blackwood was my brother-in-law, and we have every right." "Every right?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You abandoned your 13-year-old son on the street 15 years ago because I accidentally broke your precious vase. You told me I was a burden you couldn't afford. And now you're here, expecting millions from the uncle who actually gave a damn about me?" "My name is Marcus Blackwood. I'm 28 years old now, but there was a time when I didn't think I'd live to see 18. 15 years ago, I was a skinny, scared kid whose parents decided he wasn't worth the trouble. My crime? I'd been playing basketball in the house, something my mom had told me not to do 100 times, and I knocked over an antique vase. It had been in her family for generations, worth about $5,000. Instead of grounding me or making me work to pay for it, my parents sat me down at our kitchen table and told me they were done. "We can't afford to keep making excuses for you, Marcus," my father had said, his voice cold and businesslike, like he was firing an employee instead of disowning his only child. "Your mother and I have discussed this. We think it's best if you learn to make it on your own. Maybe some tough love will teach you responsibility." I remember staring at them, waiting for the punchline, waiting for someone to tell me this was all a joke, but my mother just sat there, arms crossed, nodding along like my father was making perfect sense. They gave me a backpack with some clothes, $200, and put me out on the street that same night. I was 13 years old. 13. I spent 3 weeks sleeping in parks, under bridges, stealing food from convenience stores when I got desperate enough. I thought about going to the police, but I was terrified they'd just send me back to my parents, and the look of disgust on my mother's night that last night told me I'd rather take my chances on the streets. Then I remembered Uncle Richard. "If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show her that these stories matter." Uncle Richard was my father's older brother, but they hadn't spoken in years. Some family drama about business and money that I never fully understood. I'd only met him twice in my life, once at a family funeral when I was 6, and again at a random encounter at a restaurant when I was 9. But he'd given me his business card that second time, ruffled my hair, and told me if I ever needed anything, I should call. I'd kept that card in my wallet all those years, never thinking I'd actually use it. Desperate and hungry, I found a payphone and called the number with shaking hands. Uncle Richard answered on the 3rd ring. I told him everything, the vase, my parents' decision, the weeks on the street. He didn't say much, just asked where I was and told me to stay put. 45 minutes later, a black Mercedes pulled up, and Uncle Richard stepped out. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the kind of presence that made people pay attention. He took one look at my dirty clothes and the bruise on my face from where some older kids had shoved me around trying to steal my backpack, and his jaw clenched. "Get in the car, Marcus. You're coming home with me." That day changed my life. Uncle Richard didn't just take me in, he gave me a future. He enrolled me in a private school, got me into therapy to deal with the abandonment trauma, and most importantly, he treated me like I mattered, like I was worth something. He owned a successful chain of hardware stores across 3 states and was worth about $45 million, but he never made me feel like a charity case. He made me work for everything. Summers in his stores, learning the business from the ground up, understanding what it meant to build something from nothing. Money without purpose is just paper, Marcus. Character is what you do when nobody's watching. Remember that. I graduated high school with honors, got a full ride to business school, and by the time I was 25, I was managing 3 of Uncle Richard's stores. I was making good money, had my own place, and most importantly, I'd built a relationship with a man who showed me what real family looked like. Uncle Richard never married, never had kids of his own, and somewhere along the way, he became the son he never had, and he became the father I should have had all along.
Then, 6 months ago, Uncle Richard had a heart attack. He was 73 years old, still working every day because he loved it, and one morning, he just didn't wake up. They said it was quick, painless. I hoped they were right. His death shattered me in ways I didn't expect. I'd lost my real father 15 years ago when he threw me away, but losing Uncle Richard felt like losing the sun. The funeral was small, just how he would have wanted it. A few business associates, some employees, his lawyer, and me. I didn't expect my parents to show up. I hadn't seen or heard from them since that night they abandoned me. But as I stood at the graveside, I saw them. They were standing back by the parking lot, dressed in black, whispering to each other. They didn't approach me, didn't offer condolences, just watched from a distance like vultures circling. That's when I knew. They'd heard about Uncle Richard's death and figured out I'd been living with him all these years. They smelled money. Now here we were, in Mr. Peterson's office for the official reading of the will, and my parents were about to learn a very expensive lesson about consequences. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," Mr. Peterson said, clearing his throat nervously. He was a small man, mid-50s, with wire-rimmed glasses that kept sliding down his nose. "Perhaps we should all calm down and proceed with—" "I'm perfectly calm," I interrupted, leaning back in my chair. I'd dressed carefully for today. A custom-tailored navy suit, Italian leather shoes, a watch Uncle Richard had given me for my college graduation. I wanted my parents to see exactly what they'd thrown away. "I'm just curious why you invited these 2 strangers to a private will reading." "Strangers?" My mother's voice went up an octave. "Marcus, we're your parents." "Really?" I tilted my head, studying her like she was an interesting science experiment. She'd aged, of course. Her face was tighter than I remembered, probably Botox. Her hair was perfectly highlighted blonde, and her jewelry probably cost more than most people's cars. My father looked similarly polished, his hair graying at the temples in that distinguished way some men pull off. They'd clearly done well for themselves in the past 15 years. Because the last time I checked, parents don't throw their children out like garbage. See, I had a parent. His name was Richard Blackwood, and he's the reason I'm sitting here today instead of dead in a ditch somewhere. My father had the decency to flinch, but my mother's face hardened. "We did what we thought was best for you. We wanted you to learn responsibility, to grow up, and—" "You wanted to save money," I cut her off. "Let's not rewrite history here, Mom. You specifically said, and I quote, 'We can't afford to keep making excuses for you.' Not that you wanted to teach me a lesson, not that you thought tough love would help. You said you couldn't afford to keep me, so you threw away your 13-year-old son to save a few bucks on groceries." The room fell silent again. Mr. Peterson looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. My mother's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. My father stared at his hands, unable to meet my eyes. "Now," I continued, reaching for the documents my mother had tried to grab, "let's talk about why you're really here. See, Mr. Peterson here sent you a letter about Uncle Richard's estate, didn't he? Told you there would be a reading of the will, probably mentioned that Richard left behind considerable assets. And you two, being the compassionate parents you are, suddenly remembered you had a son. Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" "That's not—we wanted to reconnect," my mother protested weakly. When we heard Richard had passed, we thought about you, thought maybe enough time had passed that we could reconnect." I laughed again, harder this time. "You didn't even come to say hello at the funeral. You stood in the parking lot watching like creeps. You know what that tells me? It tells me you were scoping out the situation, trying to figure out your angle. And then Mr. Peterson's letter arrives, mentioning Uncle Richard's estate, and suddenly you're interested in playing happy family again." I turned to the lawyer. "Mr. Peterson, why don't you tell everyone here what my parents have been claiming for the past week?" Mr. Peterson adjusted his glasses and opened a folder. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood contacted our office 4 times in the past 7 days. They stated that as Marcus's parents and Richard's only surviving family members besides Marcus, they believed they were entitled to a portion of the estate. Mrs. Blackwood specifically mentioned that Richard had, quote, stolen their son, and that they deserved compensation for emotional distress and—" "Compensation?" I shouted, slamming my hand on the table again. "You want to be compensated for the fact that Uncle Richard saved my life? That he gave me everything you were too selfish to provide?" My mother's face was bright red now. "We raised you for 13 years. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. That man swooped in and turned you against us." "You threw me away," I roared, standing up so fast my chair fell backward. "I was a homeless child for 3 weeks. Do you understand what that was like? I ate food out of garbage cans. I got beaten up by teenagers who wanted the shoes off my feet. I slept under a bridge in October, freezing, wondering if I'd wake up the next morning. And you two were probably sleeping in your comfortable bed, glad to have one less mouth to feed."
If you've ever been abandoned by someone who was supposed to love you, you know this feeling. Hit that subscribe button because this story gets even crazier. My father finally looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. "Marcus, we made a mistake. We were going through financial difficulties at the time. Your mother had lost her job, I'd taken a pay cut, and we were stressed, and you decided your child was disposable," I finished for him. "Do you want to know what Uncle Richard did when I called him? A man who barely knew me? He dropped everything and came to get me. He didn't ask questions, didn't make me beg, didn't tell me I needed to learn responsibility. He just came and saved me. And then for the next 15 years, he gave me everything. Not just money or house, he gave me his time, his wisdom, his love. He came to every school event. He taught me how to drive. He stayed up with me when I had nightmares about being back on the streets. He was at my college graduation, tears running down his face, so proud of what I'd become. Where were you?" Neither of them answered. My mother was crying now, her mascara running down her cheeks. My father looked broken, slumped in his chair. "So here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice cold and controlled. "Mr. Peterson is going to read Uncle Richard's will. You two are going to sit there and listen, and then you're going to leave and never contact me again. Are we clear?" "Mr. Blackwood," Mr. Peterson said quietly, "perhaps your parents should wait outside while we—" "No," I said firmly. "They wanted to be here for the money. They're going to stay for the truth." Mr. Peterson nodded slowly and opened the will. "Very well, let's begin. I, Richard James Blackwood, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this to be my last will and testament." The will goes on to specify various charitable donations and gifts to employees. He flipped through several pages, reading off donations to children's charities, homeless shelters, and educational funds. Uncle Richard was giving away millions to causes he cared about. My parents shifted impatiently in their seats, clearly waiting to hear their names. "To my brother, David Blackwood, and his wife, Sarah Blackwood, I leave the sum of $1 each to be paid in pennies." Mr. Peterson continued reading, his voice stronger now. "I leave them this token amount so they cannot claim they were accidentally omitted from my will. I want it on record that I consciously chose to exclude them. David and Sarah, you threw away the most precious gift anyone could have, a child who loved you. When Marcus called me that night, terrified and alone, he told me what you did. I picked him up from under a bridge where he'd been sleeping, dirty, hungry, and traumatized. Your son, your 13-year-old son, was living like a homeless adult because you decided a broken vase was worth more than his life. My mother let out a sob. My father's face had gone completely white. I could never understand how two people could be so cruel, so heartless. So I did what you should have done. I became Marcus's family, and in doing so, I gained a son, a friend, and a legacy I'm proud of. You will never know the man he's become because you didn't care enough to stick around and watch him grow. You traded 15 years with an incredible human being for a few $100s in savings. I hope it was worth it. I felt tears pricking my own eyes as Mr. Peterson read Uncle Richard's words. Even from beyond the grave, he was protecting me, standing up for me. To Marcus Blackwood, who is more my son than my nephew, who earned every bit of success through hard work and determination, who made me proud every single day, I leave everything else. My entire estate, including all businesses, properties, investments, and personal effects, goes to Marcus. He doesn't need it because I raised him to be self-sufficient, but he deserves it because he's a good man who will use it wisely. Marcus, you gave meaning to my life. Thank you for being the son I always wanted. The tears were falling now, and I didn't bother to wipe them away. My mother was openly weeping, her face in her hands. My father just stared at the table, his jaw clenched. The estate is valued at approximately $47 million, Mr. Peterson said quietly. Mr. Marcus Blackwood is the sole beneficiary of everything except the charitable donations and the $2 in pennies designated for your parents. I stood up slowly, buttoning my suit jacket. I looked at my parents, really looked at them, for the last time. You came here expecting millions. You thought you could waltz back into my life after 15 years and claim what Uncle Richard built, what he gave me out of love. You wanted to profit from your own cruelty. Instead, you get $2 in pennies. That's what your son is worth to you, right? That's about what you thought you'd save by throwing me away.
Marcus, please, my father started, reaching out toward me. I stepped back from his hand like it was a snake. Don't. You don't get to call me that. You don't get to act like you care now that you see what you missed out on. Uncle Richard's will was dated 5 years ago, long before he got sick. This wasn't some last-minute decision. He wanted to make sure that even after he was gone, I knew he chose me. He wanted you to know that you didn't just lose a son, you lost everything. I turned to Mr. Peterson. Please have their $2 delivered to their address, in pennies as specified, and make sure they sign a receipt. Marcus, please, my mother cried out. We made a terrible mistake. Please, we're your parents. You stopped being my parents the night you put me on the street, I said, cutting her off. I felt nothing as I looked at her. No anger, no sadness, just empty indifference. You taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, though. You taught me exactly the kind of person I never want to be, so thank you for that. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at them one last time. Uncle Richard left me everything because he knew I'd honor his legacy. I'm going to expand his business, triple his charitable donations, and build a foundation in his name that helps abandoned and homeless children. Every kid I help will know that they're worth more than a broken vase. They'll know that family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when you need them most. And you two? I smiled, but it was cold as ice. You'll spend the rest of your lives knowing you gave up $47 million and a son who would have loved you, all to save a few bucks and teach a lesson. I hope those $2 in pennies buy you some perspective." I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear my mother's sobs echoing down the hallway, my father's voice trying to calm her down. Mr. Peterson was saying something about paperwork and legal procedures. None of it mattered anymore. I stepped outside into the sunshine, pulled out my phone, and looked at my background photo. A picture of me and Uncle Richard from my college graduation, both of us grinning like idiots. I touched the screen gently. "Thank you," I whispered, "for everything." 3 months later, I was standing in front of a newly renovated building in downtown Chicago. The sign above the door read, "The Richard Blackwood Foundation for Youth Services." Inside, we had beds for 50 homeless teenagers, a full kitchen, classrooms, job training programs, and counselors who specialized in abandonment and trauma. It was everything I wished I'd had during those 3 terrible weeks on the streets. The local news was there for the grand opening. As I cut the ribbon, I saw them in the crowd, my parents, standing at the back, watching. They'd tried to contact me 17 times since the will reading, letters, emails, phone calls, even showing up at my house once. I'd ignored all of it, and eventually they got the message. Now they were here, and I could see the regret on their faces as they realized what their son had become, what they'd missed. I gave my speech about second chances and the importance of family, real family, and I didn't acknowledge them once. After the ceremony, as people were touring the facility, my father approached me. He looked older than he had 3 months ago, more worn down. "Marcus," he said quietly, "this is incredible. What you're doing here is none of your concern." I finished. "You need to leave." "Please, just 5 minutes. Let us explain." "Explain what?" I asked, finally looking him in the eye. "That you were stressed? That you made a mistake? I know. I figured that out years ago. But here's the thing about mistakes, Dad. Some of them are so big that sorry doesn't fix them. You can't give me back my childhood. You can't erase the trauma of being abandoned. You can't undo 15 years of wondering if I was worth loving." "We do love you," my mother said, appearing beside him. "We always have. We were just not enough," I said simply. "You loved me, but not enough to keep me. And now I have a building full of kids who are living that same nightmare, wondering why they weren't enough. Every single one of them is going to know they matter. They're going to have adults who show up, who don't give up when things get hard, who choose them every single day. That's what Uncle Richard did for me. That's what you couldn't do." I gestured to the building behind me. "This is your legacy. Every child I save is a reminder of the child you threw away. Every success story is the story you missed out on. Every time someone asks me about my family and I talk about Uncle Richard instead of you, that's your doing. You wanted to save money, so you threw away everything." Security was approaching now, alerted by my assistant that there might be trouble. "Don't come back," I said, my voice hard. "Don't call, don't write, don't send birthday cards or Christmas presents. You made your choice 15 years ago. I made mine 3 months ago when I walked out of that lawyer's office. We're done. Finally, completely done." As security escorted them out, my mother looked back at me one last time. "We're so sorry, Marcus," she called out. "We're so sorry." I watched them leave, and I felt nothing but relief. No anger, no sadness, no regret. Just peace. Because that's the thing about revenge. The best kind isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It's about becoming so successful, so happy, so complete without them that their absence doesn't even leave a hole. It's about taking the worst thing that ever happened to you and turning it into something that helps others. My parents wanted to be part of my success, to claim some credit for the man I'd become. Instead, they got to watch from the outside as I built an empire of kindness on the foundation of their cruelty. They got to see exactly what they'd lost, and they'd spend the rest of their lives knowing that they'd traded a fortune and a son's love for $2 in pennies. Uncle Richard once told me that character is what you do when nobody's watching. My parents showed their character that night they abandoned me. I'd spent 15 years building mine, and now the whole world was watching. And that was the sweetest revenge of all, not making them suffer, but making them irrelevant. If this story touched you, please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. I want to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, because knowing we have viewers from all over the world, especially our amazing supporters from the United States, the Philippines, Canada, and New York, reminds me that stories about resilience and second chances matter everywhere. Your support helps me keep sharing these stories, and who knows, maybe your comment will inspire the next one. Thank you for being here, and remember, family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up when it matters most.